Hi, everyone. Welcome to interCHANGE. I'm Dan Jones. Thank you so very much for joining us. Lots to talk about this week. We'll talk about spending time at the Republican convention. What effect will that convention have on the election and on all of us here in Wisconsin? We'll talk about whether the new police chief at the state capitol in Madison will crack down on protesters if they disrupt things again. And we'll talk about all the lawsuits filed by former NFL players who claim the league is responsible for the physical problems they suffered after getting concussions. All right, let me introduce everybody. We have Joel McNally, longtime newspaper columnist. Kevin Fischer, former broadcast journalist, political analyst, and oftentimes a fill-in host over on WISN Talk Radio. Denise Callaway, community affairs and public relations professional. Gerard Randall is on his way back from the Republican convention.
We think.
Rick Horowitz will be along with commentary at the end of the show. All right, so the first thing we have to talk about, is the Republican convention. Now, usually candidates get a pretty good bump in the polls following their party's convention, and nearly all Republicans I've seen quoted describe this convention as nearly a complete success. Kevin, the question is, how does it affect the remaining 2 months of the campaign?
Well, I think the Republicans have at least now set the path for introducing their ticket and laying out the foundation for what their campaign is going to be. And that theme was hammered out pretty consistently, I think, during the convention, that the president is a well-intentioned, nice guy. However, he's just simply too ineffective for the much-needed job of turning the country around. I thought, and no surprise, I thought it was an exceptionally effective convention. Mitt Romney gave the speech of his life. Paul Ryan hit it out of the park. There was one compelling speech by a quality individual, one after another, memorable lines. Ann Romney saying that the Romneys didn't have a storybook marriage, they had a real marriage. Paul Ryan, his line about the kids in their 20s in their childhood bedrooms looking up at fading Obama posters. A diverse convention, you bet. You can't get better than Condoleezza Rice or Nikki Haley or Marco Rubio or Susana Martinez. I thought it was a sound.
Too bad they were the only people of color in the convention.
Oh, I don't think so. Sure, that rap can always be always placed on the Republicans, and it's true because 90% of minorities don't vote for Republicans.
Wonder why.
But I thought it was a sound strategy of being critical of the administration, but not blasting the administration with harsh attacks. And again, that theme of the president being a good guy, but not up to par for the job. Great convention. Can the Democrats equal it or surpass it? Absolutely, but it becomes much easier if you have visions, plans, recent accomplishments. This administration doesn't have that luxury, so I suspect the Democratic convention will be loaded with the typical arguments that Republicans are against women, they're too white, they're too religious, they're too evil, too racist, and I think that political strategy, if it is employed, will backfire and not work.
Denise, I watched almost all the speeches, and you have to admit, other than Clint Eastwood, it was a pretty good production.
Oh, he was funny.
I think it was very well produced. I don't think there's any question about that. I think we learned that Mitt Romney is a very nice man who's done some very nice things. It's unfortunate that we didn't learn more about what he wants to do as president. No details on one of the things that he's really hanging his hat on in terms of making some changes in the tax codes and eliminating deductions. No details on that piece at all. No details from him on what he would do if he repeals Obamacare. It was a great production, but if it were, when we're writing a review, it might be that it was nice and flashy and, you said all the right things and you saw enough American flags and all of that stuff. But in terms of substance, it fell short for Romney. And for Paul Ryan, quite frankly, some of the comments that got the biggest applause lines that he made were just plain wrong. The issue about whether or not President Obama in 2008 said, if this plant closes in Janesville, it's the government's fault. And he said, and then the plant closed. Well, it closed in 2008 before President Obama was even elected president. That happened under he who would not be named at the convention, George Herbert Walker Bush. I mean, that was not
Gazette
correct.
actually reported that the plant closed in April of 2009.
It did not. It closed in 2008.
And the Republicans weren't blaming Barack
he certainly
Obama for the
was.
plant's closure. What they were saying was that his policies
was
prevented that
blaming
plant
him.
from reopening.
And he was blaming them. And if you're going to say that that may have prevented the plant from reopening, then you need to give him credit for the millions of jobs in the auto industry and other industries associated with the automobile industry that he saved by coming in and providing some financial support for the auto industry, support that Republicans, but it's support that Republicans did not make. They don't have problems spending billions on tax breaks for other folks with a lot of money, but they didn't want to spend the money to save middle-class jobs. So that was just one of the many errors that he had in that.
These conventions aren't aimed at the faithful, really, because they're going to vote the way they're going to vote. What you saw from this convention, did you see enough that would persuade any undecided or middle-of-the-road people?
I can't imagine why undecided, middle-of-the-road, anyone but a hardcore Republican, and probably next week at the Democratic Convention, a hardcore Democrat, even watches conventions anymore, because they are all scripted. It's the predictable stuff. The interesting things to me, a couple of interesting things jumped out to me about this convention. One is how reluctant most of the speakers were to even mention Mitt Romney. I mean, that was remarkable to me. Here's the man being nominated President of the United States, their nominee, and Chris Christie in his keynote address. I think he finally did mention his name once, but his whole address was about, Chris Christie. And Paul Ryan's whole address, and what really, and the other amazing thing to me was that Paul Ryan's address, and yet Paul Ryan is a terrific candidate and speaker and good-looking guy. He's one of the nicest, best-looking guys who will ever, deny the right of an 11-year-old child who got pregnant to have an abortion, or try to destroy Medicare. I mean, he comes across great, and personally, while just having absolutely repellent ideas. But the thing the media picked up on, and those who didn't know Paul Ryan before, all through the national media picked up on, was he told lie after lie after lie in the nicest tones and the best possible delivery. And the Washington Post said it may have set the record for the most lies in one political speech. And these are independent fact checkers. These aren't partisan.
Independent.
They absolutely are.
And they were refuted within 24 hours.
And as a
Well,
matter
I would
of fact,
expect that
as
you
a
would
matter
say
of
that you didn't
fact,
lie when you
Fox
did.
News called him out for lying. When Fox News calls a Republican out for lying, boy, that's a lie. That's a big lie. But let me tell you this. I agree with a couple things that you said. One is that Mitt Romney gave a nice speech and seemed like a nice man. But you know what? He, as Denise said, there's no substance to him. He looks like a guy playing president in a movie or playing president on TV. But there's no substance to him, and still nobody knows what he stands for, because he's been a liberal at times. He's been now he says he's severely conservative. No one knows what he really is, except that he'll say anything to get elected. And apparently his vice presidential candidate will say any lie to get elected. The amazing thing, to me, about the lies that Paul Ryan told from that podium, were he's told them before, and fact checkers have pointed it out and refuted it. And he still tells them. That means he knows their lies, but he's still
And this is a preview of the Democratic Convention. We won't say anything good about our candidate because we can't.
I just said
that's not going to happen at all.
We will trash the other side.
That's not going to happen at all.
We will vilify them, and we will get ugly, because that's our only hope.
I think one change that you certainly will see at the Democratic Convention is that they are going to talk about what Barack Obama has done.
And they're enthusiastic.
They're enthusiastic about it.
That'll fill up one line.
No, it won't. It'll fill up one line if you're got a line that's about that big. But the reality of it is that he
Please.
did end the war in Afghanistan. He's bringing our troops home. For women, an important piece of legislation he signed. The first piece of legislation he signed was the Liddy Ledbetter Act.
Who will be there.
Right. He also moved forward on health care, which is something that is popular. You ask people who've received, yes, Kevin. You
Two-thirds
ask
of people
those-
do not want
You
Obamacare.
ask those folks who have received the benefits of health care already and they like it. So I think it's going to be a very different convention because they're very positive things to the president.
Tell that to the person sitting on his couch unemployed the last 2 years.
He was
Next
probably
topic.
unemployed during the Bush
Next
administration.
topic.
too.
A gentleman who was in charge of the state capitol police in Madison during all the anti-Walker protests was criticized by many for not doing more to crack down on the thousands of protesters. And on the other hand, he was praised by many for his peaceful handling of what could have been a much more explosive situation. He's moved on. Now there's a new chief there, a former Marine, who said this week that he's going to clamp down on protesters and strictly enforce the law and return the building to normalcy. This could get interesting, I think.
And it could get dangerous. I mean, this is the government of a democracy. And the citizens in a democracy have a right to speak to their legislators, have a right to speak back to their governor. If they don't like something that's going on, they have a right to protest it. And this guy saying he's going to try to enforce some of those, Republican ram-through rules about what you're supposed to, if more than 2 or 3 people gather, you're supposed to get a permit in advance. No one can turn out and object to anything that their government does. This is supposed to be the public's business, and the public also has a right to be heard. And we went through a remarkable period. It was awesome. The protests and the response to the protests. In a democracy, you allow people to protest, even if it swells to take up the entire Capitol. They have a right to do that because we live in a democracy. And if this guy, first of all, if this guy tries to take away that right, he's going to be hit with so many lawsuits and be in court under injunction full time. I think people will still have a right to make themselves heard.
But if you work in that building, should you have to put up with the singers every
No.
shower?
You don't like songs?
No. Here's what I don't like, and thank you. I did work in that building for 15 years, and it's a workplace, and it's the people's capital where the people expect to go and do their business without being obstructed. Now, I still have many friends in that building and many colleagues in that building,
We all do.
many of whom were threatened with death threats. Women colleagues of
Really?
mine who were threatened with sexual assault. When you and it's not funny, Joel. I don't mind. I don't mind.
It's absurd to make those accusations
I don't
because
mind.
they've all turned out to be false.
They've been investigated.
They've been investigated and turned out to be false.
No. I'm sorry. Yeah, when you have a Dane County district attorney who turns his eye on these kinds of
attorneys
situations.
Enforce laws.
Now, I'm sorry. This permitting process is 20 months too late. It shouldn't have gotten to this point where we allow angry mobs to stormtroop the building and do all sorts of damage. To this day, they're still threatening legislative staffers. They're going into their offices and standing behind the desks of women employees, hassling them and bothering them.
Imagine that.
That's not
confronting
peaceful
public
assembly,
employees.
and you would not want to have to work under those situations.
Should they-
The permitting process that this police chief is asking for, it would be one of the most liberal in the country. Many other states have similar processes in place where you have to apply days in advance, in some cases 30 days in advance. It's about time. The state capitol is not a place for hooligans who threaten people who are trying to do their
No
jobs.
place
And
for the
every
public.
protester is not a hooligan. So to throw everyone into that category, are there people who misbehaved on both sides of this protest? Absolutely. It happened on both sides.
I didn't see conservative Republicans tearing up the building and storming
you know
the
what?
building.
And those inflated figures that were thrown out about all the damage that was done, at the end of the day, it was inflated. There was no facts behind the figures that were thrown out by the Department of Administration about the damage that was done. I've recently been to the Capitol, and it looked pretty good to me. And it
Cleaned
didn't
up.
look like that was a
They
problem.
spent thousands of dollars cleaning it up, which was
problem
unnecessary.
Instead of millions like
the
they claimed it was
problem
going to
that you
cost?
have is when you deny deny people their right to be heard, it doesn't mean that it won't happen. It just means that you put people in a situation where they have to find other ways to do it. I have a real concern. The permitting issue is one, but we have a police chief, a sworn officer of the law, who in briefings with staff, legislative staff, said, if you feel like you're threatened, not did somebody threaten you, not did somebody hit you, but if you feel like you're threatened, you should hit the person who you think is threatening you. You know what? If someone does that, and that person is going to be charged with assault, because you can't hit somebody because you think they might mean to threaten you. It has put a situation that, while all of us would agree it was not the best way for this situation that we had in this state to be worked out. It wasn't, but it was, for the most part, given the vast number of people that you had, peaceful. This police chief has set us on a path for the exact opposite.
Okay, let's say that.
Go talk to some of those people in the building and see if this is funny and something to be laughed at. You know what? Take your banjos and your beads and sandals, take them outside, take them to a park, take them to an empty field, but don't disrupt and obstruct not only the people that work there, but the people that want to come there and do their business.
Okay, let's say after, it's a messy thing. It's not always clean and neat.
After these elections, let's say that the Republicans control the legislature and they introduce something that gets people all upset again.
Quite likely.
Should Wisconsin, should the people at the Capitol have to put up with this kind of demonstration again?
You know what caused the demonstration? Some of the protests. Part of what caused it was, you put your finger on it, some of the things the Republicans did when they broke their own rules, when they threw the other side out of public meetings, they would not allow people to be heard. That causes anger, yeah, and that causes the public to get upset if they're shut out. This is the public's business, and if you call a meeting after hours at night to pass something against your own rules and according to at least one court, unconstitutional, that's going to make the public angry. But they have a right to express their anger.
If this is the feeling that we have, that people cannot protest, then what would we have said in Montgomery?
Yeah.
What would we have said in Birmingham? There were people there who were protesting an injustice that they felt. And they were coming out in large numbers.
And they were breaking the law, actually.
They were breaking the law, and they were refusing to move because they felt it was an unjust law.
You can't. What you can't do is
you can't, because I'm not finished. What you cannot do is decide that it's okay to protest in this one way, but then when it's something that might cause you some discomfort, it's not okay to protest.
For 8 years, my side hated what the Jim Doyle administration perpetrated.
You're a lot of haters.
We didn't throw beer on legislators. We didn't threaten them. We didn't bother and harass them. We didn't create a situation where legislative staffers had to have Capitol Police escort them to the restroom.
And the
we did not do that.
majority of those protesters did not. They did not.
Well, you didn't see the videos I saw.
You know what? But I did see the videos of thousands of people protesting peacefully.
Go talk to some of the people that work in the building that continue to put up with this garbage to this day.
And
God love this police chief for actually obeying the law.
Deal with the issue. The individuals not making a whole issue.
Is all this garbage that the hooligans have been perpetrating.
Not everybody's a hooligan.
The National Football League filed a motion this week asking the courts to dismiss all the lawsuits filed on behalf of thousands of former players who claim the NFL should be held responsible for concussion injuries they suffered. I find this case fascinating. Should the league be held responsible for injuries suffered when you voluntarily sign a contract to play a sport, whether that's football, boxing, hockey, whatever? And isn't it pretty obvious that it's a dangerous game, whether you're pro or whether you're playing on the 8th grade team and you suit up to go out and play the game? Should it be the St. Alphonsus' fault if you're an 8th grader and you get a concussion? If
you find out how dangerous it was and nobody told you and nobody sought to protect you, this is when we're talking professional football, and when you say thousands of players, it's not just thousands of players. It's some of the biggest names in football. Some of the people whose names we all know who have joined this lawsuit. Some of the very best players, and it's because there's now the technology, first of all, to protect that we didn't have before. And it's because we know more medically about what this kind of work has done to these people. There are protections in workplaces under the law these days. You're not allowed to run a workplace that impairs people's lives and brains and health. We know so much more now, and you can't just say, no, these people went into it voluntarily. They didn't know how limited the rest of their lives might be. They know it's a very physical game, but they don't. Let me tell you, a whole lot of those quarterbacks, including some of the best known names in football, they didn't know that when they got a concussion and they didn't have any kind of relief.
You're out of your mind if you don't understand how inherently violent and risky this sport is.
At any level.
At any level. And the answer is not all these lawsuits.
Every eighth grader who plays football knows that the rest of his life.
Maybe they don't, but they have parents.
Okay.
And you want to ban football because someone might get a head injury?
I want to protect
education,
all we can against injuries that we can protect from.
Education and better equipment. I spoke with an MPS. What would you want to call him? A sports medicine individual within the past week who told me football will never be concussion-free, even with the state-of-the-art equipment that you have today.
I don't think what the players are saying is that they expect football to be concussion-free. I think what they're saying is, were there occasions when they were playing when there was danger that was known and they were not made aware of it? And I think that's a very valid question to ask. If we look at the NFL has that warrior mentality. I mean, you're tough if you've been hit hard and you've laid on the ground for a little while, but you turn around and you come back into the game. That's the mentality that the league itself has perpetuated by the individuals it recognizes as rising stars within the league.
But if a guy goes down and is paralyzed with a back injury, is that the NFL's fault?
I think that is a different.
It can be.
But it's also
I can understand how it could be.
It's a different set of circumstances. Concussions are so prevalent in the NFL, and I think what we will see as this particular case moves forward is that the NFL had some inklings long before it's taken the measures that it has taken now that concussions were a problem.
They are attempting to clean up their act.
They are.
Yes, they are.
Because they know about these impending laws.
I had a cousin who played for, I hate to say it, the Bears. And I'll tell you, when they felt like they were hurt, they were told to go back into the game.
Yeah. And you mentioned sports medicine. That's a fairly newly developing field. There was a time when sports medicine wasn't even a field, and that in fact, as Denise says, it's that macho mentality that you keep playing through every injury, and they were put in that situation.
All right, now back to the Republican convention. Rick Horowitz has a few more thoughts about one of the convention's absolute highlights, and no, it's not the one you think. Rick.
Nah, much too easy. Besides, I'd rather talk about standing up to Vladimir Putin. Hell, Mitt Romney couldn't even stand up to Clint Eastwood. Anyway, I'd rather talk about a successful speech, an energetic, well-delivered speech. Paul Ryan's speech. It rocked the convention hall. It had the delegates on their feet cheering. In fact, it was so good, I'm almost embarrassed to bring this up, but I'm worried about him. For such a young guy, Paul Ryan is definitely showing signs of memory loss. Now, Mitt Romney's memory seemed a little shaky this week, too, but hey, if you'd been on as many sides of as many issues over the year as Romney has, you'd have trouble keeping track, too. But Ryan's only, 42? His memory should be pretty sharp. And it's not just that brain hiccup about closing the GM plant in Janesville. That happened back in 2008, of course, when George Bush was president. But that's okay. It was 4 years ago. And lots of people get George Bush confused with Barack Obama. I'm talking about more recent stuff, like Ryan criticizing Obama for ignoring the recommendations of that debt commission, the Simpson-Bowles Commission. Ryan was on the Simpson-Bowles Commission, and that was in 2010, just 2 years ago. It was all over the news. And he voted against its recommendations. As much as anyone, he was the guy who sank the thing. And now he's also railing against the sanctimony of the central planners. Did he forget his own budget plans with all those massive cuts in all kinds of programs? Sounds like central planning to me. And that was in 2011, just last year. There are pictures if his memory needs a jog. That was the same year America's credit rating was downgraded when Ryan and the other House Republicans tried to play chicken with the debt ceiling. But he must have forgotten that too, because now he's trying to pin the downgrade on Obama. What else? He says he's strengthening Medicare, but he proposed making it a voucher system. He says Obama is raiding Medicare when his own budget plan from this year includes exactly the same cuts. He even talks about making the safety net safe again, but his budget rips Medicaid, a crucial part of the safety net, to shreds. It just goes on and on. Like I said, I'm really worried about him. I mean, either Paul Ryan is suddenly losing his memory, or he's betting that we're all losing ours.
Thanks, Rick, and thank you so very much for watching. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.